All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of M365 Voice. My name is Sarah Hazy.
And my name is Mike Marani.
And I'm Antonio Maya.
Lovely. So as usual, we like to talk before we actually start recording episodes. And the topic of conversation today was Microsoft Viva. So we are actually going to dive in, and I don't think that we've really talked about Viva in depth on any of our episodes. So we decided we're going to dive in and start talking about Viva Connections today.
There was actually one episode where we did talk about Viva, and that was when we interviewed Chris McNulty. Remember, right on the Viva launch?
That's correct.
Oh, that's true. We did.
Since then, though, so I think that's a good topic.
We did not dive into the topics much, into Viva much. We just talked about it briefly. Well, he mentioned it briefly, and we asked him a couple of questions about it.
Right.
And that was it.
Yeah, so maybe we should introduce the topic of Microsoft Viva. So Microsoft announced Viva in February of 2021. It currently consists of 4 modules: Viva Connections, Viva Topics, Viva Learning, and Viva Insights, correct?
Correct.
And Microsoft announced at Ignite in November 2021, they announced a 5th Viva module that will be coming in the latter half of 2022. They've acquired a company called Ally.io, and they will be rolling out a 5th Viva module, the Ally module, and that will, it's a digital OKR solution. And what does OKR mean?
Objectives and key results?
That's correct.
There you go. You two are good at acronyms. It's really about aligning people's goals, team goals with the strategic vision of the organization and the direction that they're taking. And I believe based on the pictures and the demos that I saw at Ignite at a very high level, it will help people be able to visualize their goals, track to goals and OKRs, et cetera. So we're excited about that. Back half of 2022 is when they're saying that that's going to be available.
It's I think it's a really good fit. I really don't know much about Ally. I just read about it not long ago, but I think it would be a really good fit with the Viva platform overall. Yeah. It's a really good add-on to it.
I'm excited to see that one because, like, working at various companies, I've seen lots of different solutions for tracking objectives and goals and people's metrics for the year. And I always find them a bit clunky, those systems. And exactly. Get how to go there and I have to relearn how to use it every single time. So I'm excited about this. I'm hoping it's something that's nicely integrated into the platform and works similarly to everything else that we use every day.
Absolutely.
I agree. And it's interesting because Microsoft also announced some licensing changes during Ignite around Viva. And this is really going to dovetail into why I want to talk about connections. But I think historically, Viva Insights, Learning, and Topics have been different licensing price points, but now Microsoft has announced that you can pay one price and get the bundle of Viva Insights, Learning, and Topics, and they'll even throw in Ally when that releases as a product.
Right.
But Viva Connections is licensed somewhat differently. So Viva Connections is included in your Microsoft 365 or Office 365 subscriptions. So the licensing is different, which means I think many more organizations actually have the ability to leverage Viva Connections today, as long as they have both Teams and SharePoint Online enabled and available.
That's right. That's right. There are some requirements around Viva Connections, but if you've got those kind of prerequisites, I kind of don't see why you wouldn't use it. Maybe we can get into that more, but yeah, it's become something that we're recommending to every single one of our clients when we build an intranet, for example.
I think there are some recommendations or highly recommended requirements. They're not like hard limit requirements that you must have to implement connections. But there's a lot of recommendations about having a few things deployed into your tenant, especially on the SharePoint intranet side before you deploy your connection. That does not mean it won't work or it won't deploy, or you can't really implement it, as far as I know.
So this is where I'd kind of like to start. So I think we should introduce what Viva Connections is, but then I want to dissect that word intranet a little bit because I think it confuses a lot of companies. So Viva Connection is really a gateway to your company's digital employee experience, if you will. It's really an intersection point where you take a SharePoint Online home site that you designate for your tenant, and you enable that to basically become the landing page home icon experience in Microsoft Teams, in both the desktop app and the browser app for Microsoft Teams. This is great. Microsoft calls it a lot, you know, your company's digital intranet experience in Microsoft Teams. I think that's easy for some people to understand if their current company intranet is on SharePoint.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people find it confusing when their company's intranet is not on SharePoint. Can they still roll out Viva Connections?
I would think they can. You just have to then, you know, it places it front and center, right? Because we push Teams as the hub for teamwork, the hub for collaboration for an organization, kind of pushing people to often start their day in Teams. And it becomes kind of this top icon in the left rail in Teams, and it renders this home site within the Teams Chrome. So it kind of gets people to it a lot easier. So I do think you have to think about what content it's going to present, because it does represent kind of the home space for your company's digital experience.
And I wonder if you don't have your intranet in SharePoint online, if you're still in this hybrid mode, whether you are not fully migrated to SharePoint online or not, at some point, I'm wondering if it's going to be a hardcore requirement to have that implemented, to have that home site in place, to have that intranet in SharePoint online, to make sure that the whole Viva Connections experience work well for your organization. Today, it is not, but in the future, you never know.
Well, and I think that's kind of where Microsoft is going, as part of having Viva Connections be part of overall Viva is all about the digital employee experience. And we know employee experience is so important with people continuing to be remote and hybrid. And we're seeing a lot of changes in, I think we're seeing a high fluidity to people in their roles and taking on new roles at new companies. And I think that makes employee engagement and retention even more important.
Yeah.
I think depending on the organization, I think how they strategically fit Viva Connections into their vision is going to depend on their organization. Maybe it's going to depend on who owns the intranet, what kind of a lifespan they have on their current platform, if it's not SharePoint, where they might want to go. But I still think Viva Connections has some great offerings that I think it would be a shame to not look at it, because I think it can really be a huge advantage to lean into that, even if your intranet is not on SharePoint.
Agreed.
So, Sarah, how do you think someone would use it if their intranet is not in SharePoint? So if it's not in SharePoint, it's not going to be in SharePoint anytime soon. How would you use Viva Connections today?
Well, I think that's going to depend on the organization, because I think it again goes back to who owns your intranet content in your organization. Do they have an interest in moving into that space? But ultimately, if we look at Viva Connections, it's really an opportunity for you to provide personalized news content, announcements, and brand it from a look and feel perspective to really reflect the identity of your company from a logo and from a colors perspective. And they announced at Ignite some incredible new features, including the Viva Connections feed and the dashboard web parts that I think are going to further enhance the ability to render key information for your users. So I think that there's still a huge opportunity to leverage Viva Connections, no matter where the rest of your intranet lies.
Right. All right. So if I understand you right, you could, like if your intranet again is not in SharePoint Online, you could, designate a news site for the organization as your home site and expose that in Viva Connections if you wanted. If that news was significant enough or important enough to the digital employee experience, you could do it with just a news site.
You definitely could, and maybe we should talk about some of the building blocks of what you need in order to deploy Viva Connections.
Sure.
It's a good segue. So you need a SharePoint communication site to start with. You should also have experience building effective SharePoint communication sites, right? If you are brand new to SharePoint Online, this should not be the first site that you build. You want to make sure that you have a high-performing SharePoint Online experience with good page load times, experience, knowing what your users want to see. But you have to start with a SharePoint communication site.
So with that, that is a really key component here in any communication site. If you want to have it effective, how would you define you have to have that experience in building the communication site? Are you talking about the technical experience, or are you talking about communication experience? What kind of content you're going to build into that communication site?
Well, I think you need both. I was thinking of the latter, but
Okay.
if you don't have, but I also threw in well-performing. If you don't have a well-performing SharePoint Online experience, if you have poor page load times, for example, the last thing you want to do is add into that this Viva Connections experience in Teams and have it time out, right? But I also think that if you're gonna enable Viva Connections and make this the landing site for your organization, it had really better be beautiful.
Agreed.
Yeah, because you're gonna have more eyeballs on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want it to be beautiful. You want it to be easy to use and navigate and have compelling info, and you want it to be performant. You don't want it to be slow.
Right. And in order to be relevant and have good info, you have to understand what kind of information that your users want. Because back in the day, one of the most important reasons that people went to the internet was to find out what the cafeteria was serving for lunch that day. Not so much anymore, right? Because lunch is whatever I have in the fridge downstairs. But so I think that you need to think about for your employees today, what's the key information that they actually want to see? What do they care about? What's going to bring them to that landing page experience in Teams?
Okay.
And how do you book?
Communication site. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was going to go to step 2 before we go step 2. Do you have any comment on that?
No, I'll wait for mine.
Okay.
So communication site is the first component.
Yep. And then you're going to want to elevate that communication site to be the SharePoint home site for your organization. So currently, a home site per tenant, you're going to want to elevate it to home site status. Once you do that, then you have the ability to do other things like configure your SharePoint app bar and specifically global navigation.
Okay.
Anything else?
Oh, there's a lot more.
Keep going.
There's so many things. There's so many things. So Viva Connections, I said that Microsoft has now available a couple of new SharePoint Online web parts that are specifically tied into Viva Connections. One is the dashboard web part. So the dashboard web part basically includes adaptive cards that you can leverage to tie into your company's existing systems like Workday, ServiceNow, et cetera, and also some of your company's proprietary systems. And these adaptive cards can enable your employees to take actions straight from Viva Connections, from this landing page experience in Teams. For example, submit a time off request or click on a tile to complete their annual benefits enrollment, for example, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I love adaptive cards. That's really what makes things very exciting and alive with Viva Connections, because that interaction between the back end, that whatever you connect it to through Power Automate or any other tools or automations you have, and Teams. So it's pretty. I was very excited when I saw the adaptive cards component in Viva Connections.
And it offers a lot of extensibility from a development perspective, right? Because you can develop a lot of your own adaptive cards. What are your thoughts, Mike, on that? Because I think for some organizations, they may want to connect into their existing systems. Other organizations may lean heavily into the custom development aspect of building out custom adaptive.
Yeah, and adaptive cards is a really easy way to go and create your custom applications, if you want to call them, within Teams and expose them in Teams. We don't want to diverge much from connections, but yes, it is a way for organizations to connect to other systems. You can connect to Dynamics 365, to Salesforce, to whatever, through adaptive cards. And that makes their life much easier for the end user, because you're using Teams to enter and manipulate data or retrieve data from those other systems. And that saves organizations the time to train the users, That saves on the money to have paid for licensed users to go and connect to these systems. You don't have to be licensed to connect to these systems as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to do adaptive cards within Viva Connections and Teams.
Very cool.
I love that. That's a whole separate thing. That's a session, Mike. That's a workshop. That's a good topic. And then the second web part that Microsoft has announced is the feed web part. And the feed web part in Viva Connections really enables you to include personalized news, company events, announcements, conversations. And you can basically, if you think about it, if you're going to write news articles in SharePoint Online, you can publish those news articles, you can personalize them to different audiences and have them show up in the feed. Then you also Yammer feeds heavily into the feed in Viva Connections. And you know how much I love to talk about Yammer. But for those organizations that don't have Yammer rolled out yet, I think it is more important than ever that if you haven't taken a close look at Yammer recently, you really need to. Because announcements that you include in, for example, your all company community in Yammer can show up in this feed, as well as Antonio, if you are in Yammer, if you have joined several communities and announcements are posted in those communities, those will also show up in your Viva Connections feed. So it's highly personalized to each user's experience and really enables them to keep up to speed in a single view with SharePoint news and key Yammer conversations in that feed.
That's cool. Now I've seen the feed and the dashboard primarily talked about in the context of accessing Viva Connections through a mobile device, but I presume the web parts work on both the desktop experience and the mobile device.
Yes, but that's a good call out because the Viva Connections mobile app is now, as I think that they announced it just at Ignite, that the Viva Connections mobile app is now GA. So it is generally available.
It was preview before, yeah.
Yeah, it was in preview before. And that Viva Connections mobile app is pretty cool. It's basically got 3 key segments. It's got the feed, it's got the dashboard, and then it's got this area called resources. And resources is what ties into your SharePoint, your global navigation. Those are the wayfinding links that you set up within your SharePoint app bar that point people to key information in key areas or key hubs within your SharePoint world in your organization. And that shows up in that Viva Connections mobile app in the resources section.
Cool. And that's a separate mobile app from the Teams mobile app or the SharePoint mobile app, is it not?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
But there is some level of crossover because when you take your SharePoint communications site and set it as your home site in your organization, when you open up your SharePoint mobile app, there's a home icon in the upper right-hand corner of that mobile app, and that will take you to your home site. So it's all amazing how it dovetails together.
Yeah, I have a question about that though, because I wonder if there's much point to rolling out the SharePoint mobile app anymore, right? Because I can access the intranet through the Viva Connections app. I can access Teams through the Teams app. I can even access SharePoint online sites just through the regular browser on the device, and I get just as good an experience. So is there really, I know I'm diverting from the Viva Connections topic here, but if you roll out the Teams mobile app and the Viva Connections mobile app, why roll out the SharePoint app?
Yeah, I can see that, especially if you can go into your Teams app and go to your home site. If this is the main one, you can ingest all the news from the Viva Connection as well, Yammer Feed as well. I guess I can still see it being used if you have to access multiple SharePoint sites separately. Maybe access some documents, even though you can do that from the OneDrive.
Right, you got the OneDrive app.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's still being used if you want to really directly go to a specific places in SharePoint.
It's interesting because I still use all of the mobile apps, but I use the Teams and the OneDrive mobile apps the most. But there are times if I just want to go in and check on Yammer conversations, I'll go straight to the Yammer mobile app. Or if I just want to go and update a SharePoint site, I'll still go to the SharePoint mobile app. Maybe it's the fewest clicks.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Is there any other prerequisites or necessary components for Viva Connections, or was that all of them?
But there's a lot within here. I think you definitely need to determine what you want to do from a Viva Connections mobile app perspective. And you can't forget that in order to enable Viva Connections, you actually enable that via the Teams Admin Center. So, and Microsoft has some great documentation. So when we post this episode, and I do a blog post on it, I'll link out to some of the Microsoft help resources. They have a great like 8-step process document about how to set up Viva Connections that kind of goes through everything with a lot of detail. And then we have to not forget user adoption. So if you're going to roll this out, you want to make sure that you don't forget to tell your users about it and how it can be a value add.
Absolutely, yeah. Just market it as well. That is, if people don't know about it, if you've launched it and no one knows what's going on and what it does, then it won't be used much.
But what does that mean to do change management or adoption around Viva Connections? Like, there's an announcement you send out around it. You probably include it in some of your training material around Teams, let's say, around the various mobile apps that are supported. What else do you train your champions on it, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
else?
I think it should really tie into your employee communications and make sure that you make people aware. I've actually seen some really good ideas coming out of Ignite. They showed some video clips of Microsoft Viva in use for different customers and how they end up connecting people to it. I've heard of customers that post QR codes, right? Either digitally in signage in the office or as they send to employees, and maybe that QR code will link you to be able to automatically go and get that Viva Connections app. So I think that there's some clever things you can do to be able to make it really relevant.
That's very cool.
So there's a lot to unpack under Viva Connections, but I feel like we did a good job of introducing it. And remember, everybody, that Viva Connections comes with your existing Microsoft 365 or Office 365 subscription models. So there isn't an additional licensing component for Viva Connections. So that means it's time to understand what's in there and what the opportunity can be.
Awesome. That was a good one. That was a good topic. Looking forward for more Viva topics in the future. Well, topic is one of the services, but more sessions, more podcasts on it.
And I would say, if you do have your intranet in SharePoint Online and it's engaging and, people are generally using it, why wouldn't you use Viva Connections to make it more accessible through Microsoft Teams?
And maybe a good way to think about it is it's extensible, right? So you're able to take your intranet and your key messaging and communications for organization, brand it, and have it be accessible in the app where your users are living every day in Microsoft Teams.
Very true.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. We enjoyed the topic, and we'll double back and loop back to talk more about more of the Viva components in future episodes.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.